Every story has an author. Every author has a story. Join us for off-the-page interviews, inside stories, and a look into the world of publishing. This is Page Turners. Hi, welcome to Page Turners. I'm Hillary Kennedy. High-profile cases of sexual harassment in politics and entertainment and in corporate America, they continue to flood the headlines. But how does the average American woman deal with sexual harassment in the workplace? Well, my guests today are the authors of Play Nice, Playground Rules for Respect in the Workplace. Welcome Brigitte, Kimichik, and J.R. Tomlinson back to the show.
Thanks. Nice to have us.
Okay, so ladies, last time we talked about your personal stories of sexual harassment, but where does the bad behavior start and how can we actually affect change?
Well, bad behavior, the influences for bad behavior start at a very early age at home, in our social communities, and parents who may or may not be good role models. So it starts at a very early age, and it's critical that we pay attention to our kids and that we monitor what they're doing at home, on their computers, if they're watching pornography, social media, and even with their friends. And so what I did with my kids at an early age is to listen to them. And if there was anything going on in the headlines or at school, we would talk about it, and we'd talk about it at the dinner table. Put our phones aside and then all sit together and have a conversation so I could figure out what their opinions were and how they were being influenced.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and I believe, that said, you want to make sure and teach your children how these, I guess, hard conversation discussions at home, so that when they go to college and they're there and go into the workplace, they're not influenced by all the other people out around. And as we can see from colleges, there's a lot going on there, and a lot in the news about that with bullying and hazing and sexual assault.
Right. Well, so do you believe that it's important when sexual harassment does happen to deal with it right on the spot?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's what Play Nice is about. I think you're not going to change behavior and you're not going to influence your environment unless you do deal with it on the spot. And it's healthier for your confidence and your well-being to be bold enough to speak up. And once you do it the first time, it'll be easier the second time. And before you know it, you're much more confident in handling any kind of challenge.
Yeah, and men will be very helpful and be helpful and successful, we said, of your job. And I think men, especially ones that have respect for you, if you do have the courage to stop them at that moment and give, example or stop in the tracks and explain why their behavior was bad, I think that you're more apt for them to think about it and ponder it and to modify their behavior.
Right. And you're so right to deal with it on the spot, because I think we've all done that, where we leave a situation later and we replay it over and over in our minds. I should have done this. I should have said this. And you end up kind of losing that confidence in yourself. Well, so what do you do if you're being harassed in the workplace? What do you suggest?
Well, I think it's going to depend on the type of sexual harassment and who that person is. So you have to assess the personality, the situation, and then figure out what your best response is going to be. Now, on the spot has to be spur of the moment, right? So what we're hoping with Play Nice is that you have enough examples of those types of different situations so that you can maybe pull from your memory and say, okay, here's a situation where I can add a little bit of humor, or I need to be stern, or I need to remove myself from the situation. So you can deal with it better when it does happen. And we have great detail on what you do if it's a situation that you cannot remedy because it continues, and then what you do on really spur of the moment.
Yeah, in Play Nice, we have a lot of realistic, problems and issues that have happened, and also realistic tools that people can use to respond. And I think hopefully will give you courage to respond in that moment and what to say.
And the examples, by the way, are, as she said, real examples. We just didn't imagine them. They're either from our experiences, but most of them are drawn from colleagues and friends and young women who are in the environment now, and men who've been harassed too. It's just it's not just women.
Right.
So we've pulled these examples. We had many discussions with groups of people, different varying groups of people from different industries about what worked, what didn't work, how they felt afterwards, did it impact their career. So we tried to get as much information as we could to put these examples then together.
Well, it's nice to have those tools that you've already read about, thought about beforehand, so that when something does happen in its spur of the moment, you've already got that arsenal in your mind, to draw from. So that's great. All right, so you do categorize the different violators in your book by main personality types. So what are they, and then how does personality affect how a woman communicates with her violator, and also the potential consequences if she does say something?
Well, there are generally 3 different types of violators. So you have the predator harasser, who is really the most dangerous one, and then it can have the most impact on you if you don't deal with that person. It's usually someone who's in a power position, and he has power over your salary, your career, maybe the job opportunity, whatever it is. And if you don't do as he says, and it's typically of a sexual nature, then you lose the opportunity. So that's a lot harder to deal with, and you have to dig deep and think about, is this something I want to do? Is this a person I want to work with? And then once you've made up your mind one way or the other, you do have to speak up, remove yourself from the touching, or be stern about, look, this is not what I'm interested in. And I want to work here, I like you, I worked hard to get this opportunity. I would love it if you could give me a chance, but I can't have a sexual relationship with you. Humor may or may not work in that situation because you're talking to a power person, right? So you have to be a little bit careful, but be respectful and be firm. And then there are 2 other personality types that are much more common. One is the sort of the territorial guy who sees you as a threat. He's going to do anything he can to undermine you, to make you look silly, to embarrass you. And there you have to decide, are you in a group? Are you solo? And you have to find the courage right then and there to say, you can't treat me like that. It's not appropriate, and I really want to work with you, but this can't happen anymore. And let's revisit this at a later date if you want, or just figure out a way to diffuse the situation, and just remind him every time it happens again. And then of course the one that we see every day is sort of the harasser who is egotistical. He's just an egomaniac, and he thinks that if he can make the crowd laugh, that's going to be great. And so he's not really interested in a sexual relationship, but he just wants to make himself look better. And there, humor is a good way to go, because you're going to be in a group, and you don't want to put him on the defensive or embarrass him, because that's going to create an enemy. And that's the one thing that you have to think about, is not creating an enemy in the work environment, because that's a lot harder to overcome. So treat him with a little bit of humor, and we've got some very good examples of what has actually happened to both of us and to women today, which is kind of shocking, but it happens.
Does. And I think when you do humor, like you said, it kind of diffuses it a little bit, and they'll listen to you versus just thinking, kind of turning you off, and then thinking of how they're going to get back or whatever, and being threatened.
Right. Well, so how does your approach kind of give the victim power? Because in so many of these situations, you just feel so powerless.
Well, again, you have to decide personally, am I going to let this happen to me over and over and over again? And that's really pretty important. So if you're alone, which happens a lot, there's no one there to witness it, you have to pick yourself up and say, you know what, I'm just not, this is not going to work for me. And speak up and tell them that's inappropriate. And there are lots of different ways. You can either say, look, I'm flattered, which of course you're not flattered, but you could say, can we start over? Or you've got to come up with something to diffuse the situation, but be kind so you're not putting him on the defensive, because once you do, that's dangerous.
Gotcha. So what do you say to women who feel that they can just sort of push everything down, maybe ignore these instances of sexual harassment, and then just kind of move on from the situation?
Well, we think you need to speak up, because I think if you push things down, sooner or later it's going to come out, whether it's your mental health or well-being, is that, and I think the thing is you need to speak up and at the moment in that spot, and so that we can keep the conversation going, so we don't keep this sexual harassment going on for generations and generations.
Yeah, and I'll say something. I mean, I've worked with a room full of men many times over, and of course there's going to be banter, and a woman walks by and there's commentary on her clothing, and pick your battle. Right? You can't be on constantly saying, "Oh, that wasn't appropriate. You just said please." You can't do that.
Right.
You can, but then that's annoying. So you don't want to really do that all the time. Pick your battles, understand the language, and then every now and then say, "Guys, I just have to say this. What just happened? A little over the line." And today, especially, you could say, "Remember the Me Too movement? You're working for a company. Somebody's paying attention. You could get yourself into trouble."
Right.
So offer a positive sort of, "I'm trying to help you here. I really like all of you. In fact, we definitely love our men, and we want to help. We want to help, and we want to engage you in this conversation." Because one big thing the book talks about is don't be someone who just stands by and lets it happen, especially the men, because they have a greater voice with men than we do.
Right. It's been interesting with all of these high-profile cases, how many people, after one person spoke up, so many others come out of the woodwork and say, "I wished I'd spoken up sooner. I wished I'd done something sooner." And sometimes it takes that one strong voice first, and then people realize, "Gosh, I wished I had been that person that really stood up and took a stand and said something."
And the impact is devastating to the person who's being called out, right? Some of these behaviors occurred 20 plus years ago, and their careers are done.
Right.
And you look at that instance and compare that to people who have actually been doing this for years and continue to do it through today, despite what's happened recently with the Me Too movement. They don't seem impacted at all. And then they get called out, and you've got someone who's got sort of that's their behavioral pattern. So that's fairly serious but the poor guy that maybe was maybe a violator 25 years ago and has not been since then.
Right.
That's hard, and that's hard for them, and it's hard for their families, and
Right.
so we want to get rid of all. We really think that you need to be dealing with it today. You have a responsibility to deal with it today to help others.
And we think the bystander too, I mean, there's a position for them to speak up and help, and maybe the woman can go to someone if she doesn't have the confidence to go to someone that is either whether it's a female or a male that might be able to help her or talk to that person. And that's where we're trying to get the males to quit being on the sideline and to be part of the solution.
I love that. Well, and we've talked a lot about women, but who would you say is your intended reader for this book?
Well, that's one thing that I think is very important. So we talk to both men and women, and we want, whether you're, and particularly I would say mostly to men, because we want them to understand that they can really help with the conversation, and they have influences that we don't have, and they can step up and really help the cause. So one thing that's happened in our discussions with men, and most of our test readers were men, is they initially thought, well, I'm not a Harvey Weinstein, so it's not going to affect me, right? This is not me. And then they read the book and they go, "Oh my God, oh, I've done that, and oh yeah, I've done that too, and oh my gosh, I've done that." And then before you know it, it's, wow, I can tell you 10 situations where I was a bystander and I let it happen. And I didn't realize how the commentary was impacting the person who the comments were directed to. And I feel terrible about that, and that's not what I want either. So it's created this awareness of, oh, I'm seeing this behavior, and now I can say, hey, not cool.
Well, I love that you've written the book. It's truly come at the perfect time, because this is something that's on everybody's minds, and it's nice that we're hearing so much about it now in the news, and people are feeling a lot more open about it. So I think having this resource is just going to make things so much better. Well, ladies, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Well, and be sure to pick up a copy of Play Nice, Playground Rules for Respect in the Workplace wherever books are sold, and we'll see you next time on Page Turners.